be. But me, your man, Louie Tee. Welcome to the 2019 NFL Draft Wrap-Up Series, where your man Louie Tee aims to break down all 32 teams in the National Football League's 2019 NFL Draft using our baseball grading scale. Single, double, triple, home run. There are no strikeouts here in the Draft Wrap-Up Series. We cannot tell how these players are going to pan out, and I don't want to discount any of these young men before they get their chance in the National Football League. And so we get a score for each and every single player selected in said team's draft, apply bonuses when necessary, get an aggregate score, divide by the number of picks, which will yield us an overall grade for that team's draft. We'll then move on to the next team in the series picked by you. That's right. You, the viewer out there, are in total control, as this is the You Pick format. Simply be the first to leave a comment in the comment section of this and future videos in this series stating two things: the phrase next and the team you'd like to see next. Some examples would be NYG, next, Big Blue, Giants, next, G-Men, next. You get the point. You get where I'm going with this. As a matter of fact, next team up in the series is none other than the New York Football Giants. Big Blue themselves. And man, what an offseason it's been. Maybe the most tumultuous offseason of any team in the league, maybe outside of Arizona, who had a hell of an offseason themselves. But the Giants have consistently been in the headlines all offseason long. One of the biggest storylines the entire offseason was the trading of "Shame on you if you step to the old dirty Beckham," ODB, out of New York to Cleveland. But Dave Gettleman, your fearless leader and GM, wasn't done there. He also traded Olivier Vernon to those same Browns in exchange for Kevin Zeitler. And that actually was a big-time get for the Giants. That offensive line has been a sieve. They need to fix it. And that's a guy that's going to come in and try to help them do exactly that. But the big storyline, obviously, the trade of ODB. You get those picks in the first round back. And you get a safety as well. A young safety that's going to come in and try to help you. Obviously, you moved on from Landon Collins. That was a whole scene in itself. Were you going to re-sign him? Weren't you going to re-sign him? You ultimately elected not to. He had some bitter feelings. He was definitely salty about the whole way that situation transpired. But you get a young Jabril Peppers back in the trade of Odell Beckham Jr. into New York. And so I talked about the trade. First of all, you know I'm not a huge Dave Gettleman fan. That's probably an understatement, but that's no here nor there. My feelings about Dave Gettleman have nothing to do with the way that I assess the situation. And I told everybody during the trade, when we had a nice, long, live video on the trade of Odell Beckham. As soon as it happened, we were live and we talked about it. And I said, look, let's not rush to judgment on this trade. Obviously, the Giants are rebuilding. Now, they may not come out and say that. They may not actually utter those words. No one wants to hear their organization say, we're rebuilding and we expect to lose. This isn't baseball. This isn't basketball. You don't have full rebuilds in the NFL. Every team has a shot every year, no matter what your roster looks like, to just somehow rise up from the ashes and win. Turnovers, good fortune, a great schedule, all of these things, ball bounces your way. You could have what seems to be one of the poorest teams in the league coming into the season with no chance in hell of winning, and you could end up having a 10-win season and winning your division, or even making the playoff as a wild card, whatever the case may be. The Giants aren't going to say they're rebuilding, but obviously they've torn this thing down pretty much to its bare minimum. They've torn this thing down to the basis, all right? They're at the foundation of their football team, and they're looking to build this thing back up brick by brick. They still got Eli Manning on board, but for how long? He may not even start this season. Again, more storylines coming out of New York. Word out of camp is Eli's looked like trash, and Daniel Jones looked excellent. Now, and that was a controversial pick itself. So much to get to with this Giants football team. I've said all along, I'm going to wait to reserve judgment on what is going on in New York, because maybe Dave Gettleman has a plan that he's trying to develop. And he fast-tracked the rebuilding of this football team. He fast-tracked the Giants winning by making that trade of Odell Beckham Jr., a guy that the thing that I had an issue with wasn't the trade itself. It was the timing of the trade. You gave this guy new money just a season ago. If you wanted to get rid of him, you should have traded him last year. There was no reason to give him a brand new contract, keep him for a year, and then trade him. It was crazy, but it's done. Bottom line is, this Giants team had a bunch of draft capital. All right, they had 3 of the first 32 picks in this draft. They had a bunch of draft capital to go and do whatever it is they felt like they needed to do. They ultimately traded back into the first round and took 3 first-round picks in this draft. And they had a slew of needs that they needed to address. Again, when you're starting from the bottom, you've got a lot of needs to address. I could have easily said for their needs, hey, you need everything except a new kicker. Aldrick Rosas might have been the best player on your team last season. So other than kicker, you probably could have used just about every single position on this football team. But I narrowed it down to just 7. Normally it's 6, but it was 7 for this team. And I went into this whole draft with an open mind. I went into this Giants season and roster with an open mind. Again, I'm going to give Dave Gettleman, who I really do not care for very much as a general manager, I'm going to give him an opportunity to show me what he's got. He got to New York. This wasn't his roster, which it never is when you're a new GM in a new location. These aren't your players. You did not handpick them. You did not draft them. You did not bring them in free agency. These are his guys now. He's turning over this roster. He's getting guys in here that he thinks are the guys that can win the way he wants to win in New York. So I'm going to give him a chance to erect this roster, put it together, and see what they assemble and do together. So I'm not going to rush to judgment like a lot of people have. I'm not going to kill them for taking Daniel Jones first in this draft. We'll talk about that here in a second. As a matter of fact, I've said enough. Let's get to this Giants draft that, to me, if they're going to win in the next 3 years, this draft has to be the foundation of the Giants winning moving forward. And I really think they've done some good things here. Not great. I think they could have done some better things, but they've done a good job of selecting quality football players. Now, can they all come in and be a unit? That's something that in past years you couldn't necessarily say about the Giants. You had guys with agendas. You had guys doing their own thing off to the side. They're looking for high character guys to come in and be as one in this locker room. They got a lot of high character guys in this draft. I think that was one of the emphasis put on the players that they selected in this draft. But nonetheless, let's jump into this 2019 NFL draft of the New York Giants. We start in the first round. Remember, 3 first-round selections. None more controversial than the first one we're going to talk about. 6th overall, quarterback out of Duke, Daniel Jones, starts off the 2019 NFL draft of the New York Football Giants. So I know a lot of people were up in arms about this selection. I wanted the Giants to make this pick in the worst way, me being a Redskins fan. I had no doubts that my Redskins were going to do something stupid like select Daniel Jones at 15 if he were available. So to end all of the drama and suspense, just wanted the Giants to take him off the board because honestly speaking, I don't know if anyone else was going to draft him before the Giants got back around on the clock to 17. And hell, my Redskins were in front of them at 15. I didn't want the decision to be in the balance. I just wanted Daniel Jones gone. To me, my comp for him is Ryan Tannehill. I want no parts of Daniel Jones. That being said, he may fit someone else's roster to a T. I just want no parts of Daniel Jones. I watched him on tape. I've broken him down already, so I'm not going to do that here. If you're looking for a thorough breakdown of Daniel Jones and what he brings to the table, then you have to go to the playlist section on the Louie Tee Network. Find the Draft Prospects 101 series from 2019. And there you'll find all the players I was able to get to prior to the draft. Film is included. It is a film breakdown of these players. And Daniel Jones was one of the guys I was able to get to at the quarterback position. Look, Daniel Jones has some talent. And if him being coached at Duke by David Cutcliffe is as good as what everyone says it is, and I can't quantify that. You know, Eli Manning, Peyton Manning, the Manning family, they swear by David Cutcliffe. I don't know how good he is of a quarterback whisperer and teacher, but I can tell you this much. If he is what everybody else is promoting him as, then Daniel Jones is probably the most NFL ready of all the quarterbacks that came into the draft this season. You can see some of the things that you want to see from an NFL quarterback, you know, timing and anticipation. His arm is strong enough. It's plenty strong. But again, for me, he ran it a ton. He played in pretty much a spread offense. A lot of RPOs, a lot of easy throws. His teammates didn't do him a lot of favors. There were a lot of drops on tape. But again, I'm just not a huge Daniel Jones fan. That being said, you know my mantra, you know my motto. Get your guy when you feel the need to get your guy. The Giants felt like, look, if we don't take him at 6, there are other teams, and Dave Gettleman said this, and I thought he was wrong to come out and say, hey, I know there are 2 other teams that definitely were interested in Daniel Jones and would have taken him if we didn't get him at 6. Bruh, that's not your job to talk about what other teams are going to do with their draft picks. Keep our name out your mouth is essentially what these other teams said. And he was basically referencing Denver and Washington. Look, you don't know what those teams are going to do. All you have to worry about is your draft. All he needed to say was, look, we had the 6th pick and the 17th pick. We were afraid that if we didn't take him at 6, he might not have been around at 17. End of discussion. So instead of us having to package up picks to go up and get a guy that we could have taken at 6, we just went ahead and took him. And so we got him off the board. We took the quarterback that we felt like fit our offense the best. He already talked all season about how the Kansas City model worked. So that means they would really love it if Eli Manning could play in 28 or 19 and he could just sit and learn and then be ready to take over the mantle in 2020 and just hit the ground running and never look back. But as we all know in the NFL, things generally don't work out the way that teams plan it, all right? It's rare that the Kansas City model works, all right? That was the model for Jacksonville with Blake Bortles and having Chad Henne start the entire season when he was drafted back in 2015 or 16 or whenever it was, 14. How'd that work out for them? Henne got hurt 3 weeks into the season. In comes Blake Bortles. The rest is history. Again, generally speaking, Deshaun Watson wasn't supposed to play right away in Houston. But that situation didn't work, and he had to come in week 2 and again, hit the ground running, never look back. All right, you could look at a number of different situations. Same thing in Chicago with Mitchell Trubisky. He wasn't supposed to play in his rookie season. Shit went sideways. He gets in. He hits the ground running. They don't look back. That's generally how these things go. You start the season off saying, hey, we're gonna play. Now, granted, in those other situations, it wasn't a potential Hall of Fame quarterback under center that doesn't get injured, that plays every single snap. But I'm saying this. They want to win in New York. And if Eli Manning doesn't give them the best chance, Daniel Jones may get an opportunity sooner rather than later. He could even start the season if you believe some of the reports coming out of, look, it's mini camps, it's OTAs. Who gives a shit what's being said? Training camp will tell the story. Preseason will tell the story. We'll see how good Daniel Jones is really grasping this offense and performing out there on the field when they start to put the pads on. But I'll say this. I didn't have a problem with the Giants making this selection because this was the guy they identified as the quarterback of the future. Would I have done it? Hell no. I've already said that numerous times. Daniel Jones, not my cup of tea, not my flavor. All right. However, he was the Giants' flavor. I cannot condemn them for getting a guy that they felt like is the future of New York Giants football at the quarterback position. And he's a guy that is very well known in the Manning family. He is very, very good with Eli Manning. And so they think that's a healthy relationship. And you know, sometimes with these veterans that are holding on to their jobs, they don't want to mentor the young up and coming quarterback. They see them as a threat to their job. And so they're not looking to help them. Well, in this case, Eli loves Daniel Jones. He's going to look to help him, even if it means that this guy potentially is going to take his job. Eli knows the end is near. So why not get a guy that Eli doesn't see as a threat initially and is willing to help bring along? And it really just makes this situation a lot more tenable than if they were to bring in a Dwayne Haskins, a guy that Eli isn't familiar with. Eli sees him as a threat. Eli wants to put up his guard and say, hey, man, back up. I'm not helping this guy. They have a situation that is more kumbaya. So, again, not going to kill the Giants. They did take care of a big need, and we'll go over these needs quickly. Quarterback off the board. I didn't think it was your biggest need, obviously, with Eli Manning already on the roster, and you already had 17 quarterbacks on the roster as it was. I didn't think quarterback was the biggest need. However, none of those guys you have on the roster, they don't scream to me. Kyle Lauletta, all these other guys you have, none of them scream franchise QB. So you probably needed to do this. I wouldn't have done it with Daniel Jones, as I've mentioned, but you did it with Daniel Jones, and that's fine by me. You look at the needs of the Giants. You trade away Olivier Vernon, and J.C. Pierre-Paul was traded away the year prior. You have absolutely nothing at the edge rushing position. I mean, Martin was one of your starters last year. This guy is absolutely horrible as an edge rusher. You have nothing off the edge. You had to do something in this draft. It would have been nice if you would have done something in the offseason and then complemented that by getting someone in the draft. You chose to do nothing but sit on your hands. Edge rushing position. And that's what's been one of the catalysts for the Giants for years is you could always count, if nothing else, you could always count on the Giants to have 3 or 4 quality edge rushers in their back pocket. You know, going back to the Strahan days, they did nothing but just, Matthias Kiwanuka. These were guys that would come off the bench and still get you 7.5 sacks and just still wreak havoc getting to the quarterback. Justin Tuck, all those guys, they could rush from the interior, from the outside. They have no one right now that can get to the quarterback, inside or out. Your best pass rusher may be your interior defensive lineman that you took out of NC State last year. That's a problem. So you need edge rushing help, to me, in the worst way. To me, that's your biggest need, followed by receiver. It's bare out there. Now, you re-signed Sterling Shepard. You got Golden Tate in the offseason. But to me, Sterling Shepard is a slot. You don't have a number 2 wide receiver. And to me, Golden Tate is really best in the slot in his damn self. So really, what you're telling me is you probably got 22 twos and you've got no number 1 receiver. I don't know if you have a true number 2. I think that Golden Tate is more of a third option at this point of his career. I think Sterling Shepard is a third option at coming into the league and even now. So I really don't know what you have as the number 2 wide receiver, though, because if you're assuming Golden Tate's your number 1 and Sterling Shepard is probably your slot guy, your number 3 option, who's your number 2? Again, this is something that troubles me with the Giants. If you're going to make moves, I need direction to be shown. And I don't think that always has been the case with Dave Gettleman. And that's always been my problem with Dave Gettleman, is that he'll do things off the cuff. He'll do things very spontaneously, but he didn't think the situation out. He didn't think it through, and he doesn't have a plan in place like, hey, I'm going to do this, but this is why I'm doing it, and this is what I'm going to do to combat this. He just does things and then says, we'll figure it out later. That's how you get your ass in situations that you can't dig yourself out of, which is why he was ousted in Carolina. And he probably, if this shit doesn't work in New York, he's going to be gone here shortly as well. But nonetheless, receiver, to me, a massive need in New York. You got a bunch of castaways of guys that were supposed to be talented that weren't talented at their first stop, and you're hoping that the second stop or the third stop or the fourth stop in New York is the best stop for these guys, like Corey Coleman, like the kid from Denver that was out of Indiana. You've got a ton of those guys. Cody Latimer, you've got a ton of those guys on your roster. You're hoping that 1 or 2 of them jumps up and says, hey, you got it right. I'm the guy that you thought I was coming into the draft. I just needed some more time to mature, and they're doing it in New York. I'm not betting on that. You need more help at wide receiver. Cornerback, obviously, Janoris Jenkins is your number 1 guy out there, but after him, not much there to get excited about for this Giants football team. So cupboard pretty much bare there as well. Can use some more help at the cornerback position. Eli Apple did not work. You finally got rid of him, moved on from him. You need help at cornerback. It's really simple. I took quarterback off the board. Eli Manning is your starter, presumably right now. But again, the future franchise quarterback wasn't on the roster until this selection of Daniel Jones. And so you needed to address that. I got 2 needs at number 5, tied for number 5. Defensive line, offensive line. Offensive line is slowly but surely getting better. I still think there are improvements that could be made, but you're taking steps to putting a competent offensive line in front of whoever the quarterback is. Last year, that was not the case. And so you feel like you're starting to put the pieces of the puzzle together. I don't think you have all the pieces, but it's getting better, slowly but surely. But you need more help along your offensive line. And defensive line, Damon Harrison, Snacks Harrison, traded during the season last year. Again, once you traded him, the rush defense went and took a nosedive. That's to be expected. He's one of the best rush defenders, if not the best in the league. You need to replace his ability to stop the run, and you did that in the first round of this draft. So that's something else that I thought was a need. And then linebacker. You traded for a guy that I thought played well last year at times, but wasn't always what you thought you were getting in Alec Ogletree. He made some big splash plays. He also gave up some plays. So with Alec Ogletree, that's why the Rams got rid of him. He's a big play waiting to happen. He's also a big play for the other team waiting to happen. So You take the good with the bad with him, but you need more depth at linebacker, period. End of discussion. There's just not enough there. So that's another position that I thought you just needed to address is linebacker. I like B.J. Goodson. He's solid, but he's not a needle mover for me necessarily. So you just need more depth, I think, at linebacker, and that's why that's there. So with that being said, let's go ahead and start breezing through this draft. Daniel Jones taken 6th overall, quarterback out of Duke. I have no problems with it. I know a lot of people expected me to beat them up. I'm not going to beat them up. I've said my piece. I talked about it on draft night. I was elated because I didn't want the Redskins to take him. I wouldn't have taken him at 6, but again, that's their guy. They identified him as their quarterback of the future. Have no problems with it. First round, 6th overall pick, quarterback out of Duke. Daniel Jones, for me, is so we move on to your next pick in the first round, 17th. This is the pick you netted from the Browns in the Odell Beckham Jr. trade. So you get the 17th pick overall. I thought this was going to be where you took a big-time wide receiver. You elected not to. Instead, you go Clemson defensive lineman Dexter Lawrence at 17th overall. So once again, not going to break Dexter Lawrence down. I've already done that on the Draft Prospects 101 series. So if you're looking for a thorough breakdown, that's where you will find it of Dexter Lawrence and all the other prospects I was able to get to prior to the draft. Let's take defensive line off of your needs list because I thought it was a need that you needed to address. Again, your rush defense wasn't good enough last year. B.J. Hill was outstanding for you in terms of getting to the quarterback. He was solid in the run game, but it wasn't good enough. He needed help. Now he has legitimate help here in the form of Dexter Lawrence. If you watched my Draft Prospects 101 series, if you've listened to my podcast, Louie Tee Network podcast available on Stitcher, Google Music Play, Apple Podcasts, TuneIn, Spotify, and of course the website louieteenetwork.net. If you've listened to my podcast leading up to the draft, then you know I thought higher of Dexter Lawrence than his teammate Christian Wilkins. I think that much of Dexter Lawrence. I think this guy is not only a space-eating, run-stuffing defender, I also think he can get to the quarterback if given an opportunity. I think he's a lot more nimble than people give him credit for. He's a big, big man, but he can also move very light on his feet. I think he is a difference maker on a defensive line that needs some help. So while I would have went in a different direction, I would have went wide receiver here because you're not going to produce at a high level with whomever is that quarterback unless you have more stuff at receiver. I thought you waited a little too late in this draft to attack wide receiver, but there was still some stuff on the board. But nonetheless, I thought this was the opportunity to do that. Get your quarterback at 6, get your receiver at 17, and then you start building around that. But you went defensive line. I don't have a problem with this pick. I love Dexter Lawrence as a football player. I think this is a tremendous pick. I think very highly of him, probably more so than most people do, but I love what this guy brings to the table. And I told you, I think he can actually affect the quarterback on third downs. I don't know if he's going to beat guys with quickness off the snap. I've seen him do it. At this level, I don't know if he'll do that, but I know he can overpower guys and collapse pockets. I do know he can do that as well. So I think that there's more value than just a first and second down run stuffing defender. I think this is a guy that can do a lot of different things. And so I feel like this is a really good value pick here at 17 for the New York Giants. First round, 17th overall pick, defensive lineman out of Clemson, Dexter Lawrence for me is...
Hits it high! Hits it deep! It is out of here!
And my comp for Dexter Lawrence is Snacks Harrison. He to me, is Snacks Harrison. Now, I think he's Snacks Harrison with the ability to affect the quarterback on third downs. That's the big difference here. That's why you spend a first-round pick on Dexter Lawrence. I've always said, and I always have contended, that if your guy can't get to the quarterback as a defensive lineman, you shouldn't be taking him in the first 20 picks. You shouldn't be taking him in the first 15 picks. If your guy can't do both, if he's a one-dimensional football player, whether that be getting after the quarterback or stopping the run, if he cannot do both, then he shouldn't be a top 15, top 20 pick. And you took him at 17, so obviously I think you feel like he can do a little bit of both. Dominant in one area and can help in the other. We go to your next pick. This was not originally a first-round pick. You traded back into the first round to make this selection at 30th overall. The defensive back out of Georgia, DeAndre Baker, is the selection. So this wasn't my favorite pick of the draft. This isn't a bad pick. It's just not my favorite pick. If you were going to go cornerback here, this was the first cornerback. The top had not been popped on the cornerback position. The seal had not been opened. It was still closed. It was still locked. You pop the top on the cornerback position, which means you had the pick of the litter of any cornerback you so desired, and you deemed DeAndre Baker to be the best of the group. I vehemently disagree with that, okay? Now, again, I'm not you. I'm not Dave Gettleman. I'm not your scouts. I didn't assess this player and determine that he was the best for our football team. He may fit your defensive scheme to a T with James Bettcher. I can't say that he doesn't or does. I can tell you this. If you're just talking pure cover corner, a guy that can cover the other team's wide receiver one-on-one and assist in tackling in run support, he's not the best in this draft at doing that. That's how I feel, okay? Obviously, the Giants disagree with me. So, 5'11", $193, all right? 4'5", 240. I was not impressed with DeAndre Baker. Really, a lot of the Georgia guys let me down at the combine. So I went into film study a little disappointed in DeAndre Baker. I know what my eyes saw throughout the college football season. I know that this guy was a really solid football player. I expected more from him at the combine. I didn't get it. But, you know, the tape to me is superior and above all else. And so when you watch him on tape, you see a steady, very solid NFL corner. Let's take cornerback off the list of needs, as it was a big one. All right, and the Giants needed to address cornerback, and they're not done, and they didn't need to be done because they need help. But a cornerback that won't wow you with sizzle in terms of measurables and athleticism, etc., but comes with a ton of substance. Baker lacks ideal physicality and top-end speed, but makes up for it with grit, awareness, and ball skills to match. So when I watch him on tape, I don't see a guy that screams first-round talent. As a matter of fact, I had a second-round grade on him. I didn't think he was a first-round type of football player. I just didn't see the traits that make you a first-round pick. But again, I liken him to another guy, and this is not who I'm comparing him to, but I liken him to another cornerback that was selected at right around this area, back end of the first round. I didn't feel like he was a first-round corner. Thought he was more of a second-round corner, but he looked eerily similar size, similar ability, and he's been a really solid pro since getting into the league. And Tre'Davious White out of LSU. Same body type, same conference, same play. He didn't wow me at all, but he was a lot faster, and he checked more boxes for me than that of DeAndre Baker. But they have similar games, if you ask me, but I'm comparing DeAndre Baker to that of Bashaud Breeland, the ex-Washington Redskin, ex-Clemson Tiger that came into the league. Wasn't a flashy player, but very confident. A guy that, when he first came into the league, looked like he was going to be a stud corner. Had some mental issues, not literally like off the field mental, but I think he made some plays or didn't make some plays. Guys beat him. It got into his head. He wasn't the same player that he was in his rookie season and even into his second year, but never took that next step. But we'll see with DeAndre Baker. Maybe he comes in and he's a lot better than I'm giving him credit for, but I would have taken 4 corners off the board probably before I thought about taking DeAndre Baker here. I just thought Rock Ya-Sin, for me, more of a raw prospect, but to me, higher upside than a DeAndre Baker. I would have taken Greedy Williams without a doubt. Now, again, Greedy doesn't necessarily want to tackle, but you're talking covering guys. I would have taken Greedy over him. Justin Lane is a guy that I absolutely love, that he didn't go to the 3rd round. So, again, there are other players that I thought were potentially better, higher upside for sure than a DeAndre Baker. I think you know what you're getting in Baker, and maybe that's what made the Giants comfortable with this selection. Again, I wouldn't have taken him 30th overall, but that's what the Giants decided to do. I'm not going to kill them for it. We'll all get to watch and see how these picks turn out for them. First round, 30th overall selection, defensive back out of Georgia, DeAndre Baker for me is So you go from one of my picks that weren't my favorite to one of the picks that were one of my favorites of this draft. Third round, 95th selection overall. Edge rusher out of Old Dominion University representing the Monarchs. Ximenes is the pick. Ximenes is the pick here for the Giants in the third round, 95th overall. No second rounder, obviously, with the trade back into the first round to select DeAndre Baker. But this is a guy that, first of all, let me tell you, I am biased, okay? I am a graduate of Old Dominion University. I was overcome with joy to see the first ever Monarch selected in the NFL draft here in the third round. Now, he would have a teammate join him later on in the draft in the sixth round at the receiver position. But this was a monumental pick for the Old Dominion program. It brought joy to my heart to see a guy that I watched over his career blossom from a guy that could always get to the quarterback, but then started to impact the game in a multitude of ways. And the sack total increased every single year. He became a guy that you had to game plan for. A lot of chips, a lot of double teams in his senior season, and he still produced his highest sack total of his career with 12. This guy is a beast. If you're talking about getting to the quarterback, the Giants have the new face of their defense in terms of getting to the quarterback. He's going to do that for you. I guarantee you that. The problem with Ximenes is, can he stop the run? That's the biggest issue with Ximenes coming into this league is, can he stop the run consistently? But, man, I love this pick. It's actually a bittersweet pick for me. Me being a Redskins fan, obviously, I can't root for him the way that I want to, but I'm going to root for him because I want to see this guy succeed. Major succeed. I really want to see this guy light it up in the league. I just don't want him to do it against us. But I would have loved him going anywhere but Philly, Dallas, or New York. But he ended up in New York. I couldn't be happier for him. And you got yourself a hell of a football player here. Let's take edge rusher off the board. I told you that I thought this was your biggest need. So this is definitely some tremendous value here in the third round because, you know, once you start getting to the third and fourth round, you start getting into the bottom of the barrel of the elite edge rushers. This draft was weird in the sense that there were still a lot of quality guys that could get to the quarterback in the third round. Jacob Polite was still around. Ximenes was still around. So there were still a number of guys still available in the third round, and you happened to get one that was really good. 6'3", 253. This is a guy that just blew it up at Old Dominion in the MAC conference. The first ever Old Dominion Monarch to be drafted, Ximenes was born to rush the passer. His ability to bag quarterbacks is top-notch with a bevy of moves and a black belt in hand usage. His 33 career sacks and 11 forced fumbles speak for themselves. The big question with Ximenes is whether he can stop the run consistently. That may or may not come. But players with his skill set do not appear often. Thus, it will be hard to keep him off the field, especially in obvious passing situations early in his NFL career. This is a guy that had 33 career sacks, 11 forced fumbles, which was up there in terms of his entire career. In the last two seasons, he was in the top 15 in the nation in forced fumbles, 4 in each of the last two seasons. 51 and a half career tackles for loss. So this guy was a nuisance. I watched him against Marshall in a game. And a lot of these games I watched on TV, so I already knew what was going to happen, but I went back and watched it anyway. It was a rough season for ODU in a lot of ball games. Didn't find a way to win, but he played hard regardless. And there's a play against Marshall where he gets his hand up in the pass lane as he's on his way to the quarterback, deflects the football, then picks it off. I mean, he's that kind of football player. He's a playmaker. He's a guy that makes plays that impact the game. My comp for him is Junior Gillette. And not the Junior Gillette that you saw towards the tail end of his career in Washington. I'm talking about the Junior Gillette that was a menace in New Orleans, that was getting double-digit sacks and looking like his career was on the upward trajectory. This is a guy that can get to the quarterback. The thing with Julian Gillette was always, can he stop the run? That's the same question you're going to have for Ximenes. But I can tell you this much. This is a guy that can get to the quarterback. He was made to bag quarterbacks. He's going to affect the passer at the next level, if nothing else. And so I love this pick for the Giants. 3rd round, 95th selection overall. The first ever Old Dominion Monarch, Ximenes, for me, is... So you move to the 4th round, 108th overall selection. The defensive back out of Notre Dame, Julian Love, is the pick. So you go from my alma mater and the school that I love to the school that I root for. Now, again, you say, how can you have 2 college football teams? Again, I grew up a Notre Dame Fighting Irish fan. It was the only football team that I saw growing up. So that's the team that I adopted. Then I go to school and I go to Old Dominion. That becomes, there's a sense of pride, and there's a specific word I'm looking for here, that loyalty that you have to your university when you graduate from there, when you give them your hard-earned money. There's a sense of entitlement that you have to the program. And so that I'm an ODU fan, obviously, for obvious reasons, but I'm a Notre Dame Fighting Irish fan probably as well. I won't say first and foremost because, like I said, ODU is important to me, but Notre Dame is big as well for me. And Julian Love is a guy that I never was really hyped on. You know, he got a lot of attention, and a lot of people were singing the praises of Julian Love. I never was really one of them. I never thought he was as good as people were touting him as. There are a lot of times where people kept throwing out future first-round pick, and I'm like, this guy's not a first-round corner. As a matter of fact, I would take 7 corners in this draft before I would even think about Julian Love. And that's exactly what happened, is he didn't go into the 3rd round, and that's probably where he was supposed to go. This is probably best case scenario for him. When you look at the tape, when you watch him, there's a lot of deficiencies. I didn't think he had a strong combine either. But then again, I wasn't expecting him to, because I've watched him at Notre Dame and he never blew me away with athleticism. So this is a guy that I think is solid. I think the Giants view him as potentially a nickel for them. And that's probably his best spot. I think he actually might be even better as a nickel than out wide. And so I think he's got better quickness and feet than he does long distance speed, which is what is required in the slot. You have to be quick. With all these shifty receivers that get in and out of breaks, make sharp cuts, and are available to quarterbacks very quickly on 3rd down. You need quick corners. Julian Love, for me, is a quick corner. And I told you needed corner help. It was the second biggest need on the board. Or excuse me, where are we at? 3rd biggest need on the board. And so you take another cornerback here. You already did it in the 1st round with your 3rd first-round pick in DeAndre Baker. 5'11", $195 for Julian Love. 4.54 40 at the combine. A well-rounded corner with good movement skills and solid instincts. Can be a little handsy down the field and has a tendency not to locate the ball in flight. You know, that's one of my biggest pet peeves. He used to drive me nuts at Notre Dame, not looking back for the football. He used to get away with it because quarterbacks would make such poor throws that the ball was almost uncatchable, and so it hit him in his back, or he'd just pull up just early enough because he'd be face guarding to not get the PI called. But if those receivers were smart, they'd throw their body into him. He'd have got PI every single time. But because he doesn't locate the ball in flight, he finds himself in a face guarding position very often. However, he is generally near the action, and with his eyes on the quarterback and or the ball, he can and will make plays. So he's a guy that you want to put in advantageous situations. He's not a guy that you can put him in any situation and he's going to come out on top. Those are the guys you take in the 1st round. Those are the guys that bleed over to the 2nd round. Guys that go 3rd round or later, they've got severe deficiencies that you've got to cover up and mask in order for them to maximize their talents. He's a guy that you have to put in advantageous situations, or else he will be a flag magnet at the next level. So it's a solid pick, though. I think it's good value in the 3rd round, 4th round. I think it's tremendous value, as a matter of fact, in the 4th round. I thought he was more of a 3rd round corner myself, and you get him here in the 4th round. So I think it's a really good value where you got him. But I'm still not sold on him totally. The complete Julian Love package, if you will. Not sold on it. So I have my doubts. I have my reservations. But we'll see how he plays out at the next level. Like I said, I think the Giants are going to try him in the slot with Jackrabbit on one side and now Baker on the other side. I think this is going to be the ideal location for him in the slot. And he might actually fare well there. I think that might actually be a good fit for him with this Giants football team. 4th round, 108th overall selection. Defensive back out of Notre Dame. Julian Love for me is... My comp for Julian Love is Malcolm Butler, the Super Bowl winning cornerback that burst onto the scene with the pick versus the Seattle Seahawks in the Super Bowl. Really solid corner, but, he's okay. He's not great, which is why New England didn't want to pay him. He's okay. He's not great. So we'll see what happens with Julian Love. We go to the 5th round, 143rd overall selection. Linebacker out of Wisconsin, Ryan Connolly is the pick. So Ryan Connolly, for me, fills a need at linebacker, so let's go ahead and take that off the needs list. But more importantly, he's a guy that I look at and say a lot of people are going to peg him as a backup, a guy that's going to help you on specials, but probably not going to be able to give you any starting snaps. I don't know if the Giants have enough guys on the roster to keep him from getting on the field eventually. Now, I don't think he's going to jump into the Giants starting lineup right away, but he's a guy that I think there's enough film here to see that what he does translates to the next level. So, actually was impressed with him, more so than I thought it was. Because, look, you know what you're getting from Wisconsin. You're getting slow, plodding, tough, physical, linebackers that go downhill, but they don't have a lot of athleticism. At least that's what I thought. But you're starting to see a little bit of a change with Wisconsin, with the TJ Watts of the world, and now a guy like Ryan Connolly. There's a linebacker that the Browns took a couple of years ago from Wisconsin. He's a really good athlete. I like him a lot. Joe something. I can't remember his entire name, but they're getting faster at Wisconsin. I'll say that, okay? As a conference, as a whole, they're getting faster in the Big Ten, all right? They're getting faster. I used to always clown the Big Ten. They don't have athletes, so how fast are the Ohio State players anyway? Because they're not going up against guys that are really fast. The entire conference as a whole is getting faster, and that's evident by these Wisconsin linebackers. That being said, 6'2", 242, so a little bit bigger than what you accustomedly have been seeing coming into the league of late. Still not necessarily as big as you would like in a Sam linebacker, but I think he is more athletic and can be a will if given an opportunity, but he's probably going to be more suited to play inside at middle linebacker. Nonetheless, a sneaky athletic, smart, tough linebacker that uses above average instincts to attack downhill as a blitzer and tackler. Takes responsible angles and breaks down fundamentally to make sound tackles. Quality coverage as a zone defender. He checks all of the boxes as a solid backup / fringe starter at the NFL level. My comp for him, and I'm going back a little ways, not too far back, but some of you may not be familiar with this name, but the Cowboys had a very productive linebacker in the mid-2000s into the late 2000s. And Brady James, very good, a linebacker for a number of years. And he reminds me a lot of Brady James. Similar size, similar athleticism, similar smarts, similar toughness. Brady James was a hell of a starter for a number of years. It would not shock me in the least if Ryan Connolly, 3 years from now, is working on 2 solid seasons, the third of which was a Pro Bowl season, or he was a snub from the Pro Bowl but could have easily went, or is an alternate. This is the kind of talent that I see with this guy. Can blitz, finds the football, finds a way to take on blockers, disengage, get to the rock. It just does everything really well. Some things above average, but nothing great, but everything at least baseline average level to above average. So solid pick here in the 5th round, 143rd pick, linebacker out of Wisconsin. Ryan Connolly for me is So we move on to the 5th round now. Another 5th rounder for the Giants. 171st pick overall. Wide receiver out of Auburn. Darius Slayton is the selection. So Slayton for me is a guy that I thought I mocked the Redskins to take him in one of my mock drafts. I did a 7-round mock draft for the Redskins, and Darius Slayton was a guy that I had the Redskins taking, I think in the 4th round, if I'm not mistaken. So you getting him here in the 5th sounds about right. I saw him as a talented football player trapped in a horrible college offense. So you really didn't get to always see the best of Darius Slayton, but that goes for just about anybody that plays at Auburn that's not a running back. You get to see the best of the running backs at Auburn, but you don't necessarily get to see the best of all the other skill guys because of the offense that they're in under Gus Malzahn. I've talked about this numerous times, so I'm not going to bore you with my disdain for that offense. But this is a guy that has some talent, man. And I don't know if he fits exactly what you need, but you do need a receiver and you do need help. So let's take that off the board. I don't know if he fits the number 2 wide receiver problem that you have, because if we assume Golden Tate's your number 1 and that you're going to have Sterling Shepard in the slot, then I don't know if he necessarily fits the guy that you need opposite of Tate on the other side. Maybe he does. I think he could actually grow into a quality number 2, possibly number 3 type receiver in this league, but he's not that right now. But 6'1", $190, 4.39 40, which you can see very clear as day on tape, 40.5-inch vert, 11.25 broad. So all of the explosive numbers are there. And again, it matches up with what you see when you watch him at Auburn. Another Auburn Tiger whose true offensive talents were masked by the rudimentary offense that he played in. Darius Slayton looks the part of a football player who ran track and not the other way around. Remember, there's a stigma that is attached to track guys. If you're not a football player, but more of a track guy playing football, that's a stigma that can be attached to you. He's a football player that happened to really be good at track, and you can see that by the speed that he has. But make no mistake about it, he's a football player, not a track guy playing football. So his burst and his ability to not only stretch the defense, but also create after the catch is apparent. But lack of route tree and inconsistencies with drops makes Slayton a less than sure thing. What is certain, though, is that there's talent here. That's for certain. So when I see him, he's a guy that you throw a curl route to. He turns and gets up the field and takes an 8-yard curl and turns it into a 38-yard catch and run because he's got that kind of speed. If that corner for 1 second hesitates or makes a wrong false move or takes a bad step, he's going to accelerate past him. I've watched him do it on tape plenty of times. I've watched him run by guys. His 2017 tape, way better than his 2018 tape. I mean, this dude at one point, I think in 2017, he might have averaged 22 yards per catch. He was that explosive for their offense. Their entire offense looked better in 2017, though. They were a more complete offense in 2017. Still didn't love the offense that he was in, but they were a much more complete offense. That being said, he made the best of the situation in 2018. The offensive line was a mess. They didn't get the best play out of their quarterback, Jarrett Stidham. But in any event, he still made some plays. He dropped some footballs, though. That's something that concerns me. He'll need to be better catching the football. He can work on that, though. His hands are natural. It's not like he can't catch, like he's fighting the football and that he doesn't have natural hands. He just sometimes wants to make a play before he sees the football into his hands. He needs to concentrate and make sure he catches the football. As I've always said, you can't run and gun, you can't have fun, you can't ball without the ball. And he just has to understand that. But this is a guy with some talent, man. This is a guy with some talent. My comp for him is DJ Chark, a guy that was drafted in the league last year out of LSU at the wide receiver position. Another guy that could run, still had some doubts about his ability to run routes and things of that nature. I wasn't sure about DJ Chark's hands all all that much. And so all of the concerns I had for DJ Chark last year, I have this year for Darius Slayton. So to me, they're splitting images of one another. I think Chark may be a little bit bigger than him. 6'2", might be a little bit heavier in terms of weight. But you're talking about similar players in Darius Slayton and DJ Chark. So that's why he's my comp for him as you go 5th round, 171st pick overall, wide receiver out of Auburn. Darius Slayton for me is... So we move on to the 6th round, 180th pick overall, defensive back out of Washburn. Corey Ballentine is the pick. So I told you the Giants needed a ton of help at corner. They're not done. Their 3rd defensive back taken in this draft, Corey Ballentine in the 6th round. Now this pick almost turned tragic as the night he was drafted, he went out to celebrate with a couple of his buddies from the team. Gunfire rang out. One of the guys he went to the party with, one of his friends and ex-teammates, was tragically killed. He was shot himself. Luckily enough for him, he was able to recover, but unfortunately, his teammate and friend was not able to say the same. And so you hate to see things like that happen, but I'm glad that he's going to make a full recovery. And it almost turned tragic for him as he was selected and made his NFL dream come true. But nonetheless, small school guy, Washburn, obviously lower level competition. So obviously the biggest question that you're going to throw out first and foremost is how is he going to perform against better competition? That's why you want to see these guys in those postseason all-star games to see how they size up with some other competition that's at a higher level. He was a guy that came out, showed well, and so here he is in the 6th round for the New York Giants. 5'11", $196, 4.47 40, 39.5-inch vert, 11.25 broad. So another explosive, dynamic athlete taken here by the Giants in the draft. An extremely versatile cornerback that excels on special teams. He was a dynamic kick returner, a gunner, a guy that makes a ton of tackles on special. So right then and there, he's got a chance to carve out a niche for himself. Even if it's not at the cornerback position right off the bat, this guy can come in and play dynamic special teams. Not good, not average, not above, dynamic special teams as a kick returner, as a gunner, and this guy's blocking kicks. I watched him block a kick off the edge, which is so rare in the NFL. Generally, if you block a kick off the edge, you're offsides. All right. He was able to get around with his speed, lay out, and block a kick twice. So this is a guy that has that ability on special teams as well. But he can also play the nickel slot for you or out wide as a boundary corner. When I watched him on tape, I said, man, this guy looks really small. He looks smaller than 5'11". All right, but if they say he's 5'11", he's 5'11". He looked like he was 5'9". But they say he's 5'11". Okay, he's 5'11". I just know he looked small out there. That's all. But nonetheless, Ballentine seems to play off quite a bit. I watched him. He was off a ton in coverage. Not a lot of man-to-man, uptight, close, and personal with these receivers. He was off eyeballing quarterback, eyeballing receiver, eyes on the ball type of thing, off in zone coverage. But nonetheless, he uses his quickness to close the gap on throws. And I think, so now the question begs, can Ballentine handle the jump to the NFL competition? Or is he nothing more than just a special teams maven? We'll see. My comp for him is Vontae Davis, the ex-Miami Dolphin, Buffalo Bill, San Francisco. Did he go to San Francisco? I'm not sure if he went to the 49ers. I don't think he ever went to the 49ers. But ex-Dolphin, ex-Buffalo Bill, Vontae Davis, ex-Colt, was a guy that had some talent. I don't think he ever truly reached the apex of his talents. He came close, had some really good seasons in there when he was able to stay relatively healthy, but similar stature with Vontae Davis, similar speed, similar ability. I like Corey Ballentine. I don't love Corey Ballentine. But again, that's why he's here in the 6th round. That's why he went to Washburn. I love him on special teams. So that way, I think that's his way onto this roster initially, is via special teams. And then by getting on the field on special teams, that's how you work your way into the defensive lineup and get snaps there. So We'll see what happens with Corey Ballentine, but nonetheless, in the 6th round, 180th pick overall, defensive back out of Washburn. Corey Ballentine for me is. So we move on to the 7th round. Giants had 2 7th rounders to wrap up their draft. 232nd pick overall. Offensive lineman out of Kentucky, George Asafo-Adjei is the pick. So George Asafo-Adjei is a guy that I look at 6'5", 306, and I talked about the Giants needing offensive line help. They somewhat addressed that here. I don't know if this is a guy that's going to be able to help you or not, but nonetheless, we'll take that off the board as they did select an offensive lineman in this draft. 6'5", 306, 33-inch arms, 23 starts at right tackle in his career at Kentucky. Apparently was a very well-respected team captain on that football team. I talked about the Giants getting a lot of character guys, high character guys, high IQ football players in this draft. Add another one to the list here in George Asafo-Adjei. That being said, this is a raw prospect, man. This is a guy with a lot of fundamental flaws, a lot of things he's got to clean up in order to not only make this roster, but to be a productive member of this Giants football team. First of all, I don't think he's a tackle at the next level. I could be wrong. All right, there is a little bit of athleticism. He wowed people with his athleticism at the UK Pro Day. I didn't see that on tape, okay? I don't know if that athleticism translates to the field. He ran a good 45.03 40, but his lateral quickness is horrible. He can't change directions. When he gets his weight going in one direction, he can't stop and change direction. So twists and stunts give him fits. Guys with quickness beat him off the snap. He can't adjust. He can't rebound. He can't overcome losing a rep early and somehow salvage the rep and get back into the play. He's very stiff. His hand placement is horrendous. He doesn't sustain blocks, but those are things you can correct. If you correct hand placement, you correct sustainability. Because if you have your hands in the right place, you can sustain a block without holding. When you don't have good hand placement, then you're all over the place. Your hands are flying all over the place. You're not going to sustain blocks without holding. So he's a guy that just has a lot of technical things he has to work on, but he's got a big body. He's got the ability to play guard or tackle, and I think guard is honestly going to be his home at the next level, but there's something here. You know, I watched him move some guys from point A to point B, create a new line of scrimmage in the run game. Benny Snell and company did some work on the ground, and George Asafo-Adjei was one of the reasons why they were able to do some of the things they were able to do in the run game. So he's not totally useless, but he's a guy that needs a lot of work if he's going to help this Giants football team in the future. And so in the 7th round, 232nd pick overall, offensive lineman out of Kentucky, George Asafo-Adjei, for me, is. My comp for him is Menelik Watson, a guy that was drafted in the 2nd round by the Oakland Raiders some 5, 6, 7 years ago out of Florida State. They had high hopes for him. Looked good. He passed the eye test, similar to George Asafo-Adjei, but just never was able to make that transition. First of all, Menelik Watson couldn't stay healthy. Number two, his athleticism didn't necessarily translate to the field. I think that is my biggest fear for George Asafo-Adjei, is that the athleticism won't necessarily translate to the field, especially if he couldn't do it at the collegiate ranks. I definitely don't expect him to stay in front of these athletes at the NFL level. Excuse me, you finally wrap up this draft, 7th round, 245th pick overall. Defensive lineman out of Syracuse, Chris Slayton is the pick. In a deep draft of defensive linemen that were being taken off the board at a feverish pace in the 1st round, the Giants said, look, it's the deepest group of players in this draft. Why not grab a player in the 7th round and take a flyer on him in the deepest group? Maybe we'll get a really hardy leftover in a table scrap in the 7th round that was left from what was the best position in the draft. I don't think they did that here. This is a guy that I watched 6'4", 307 out of Syracuse. I just didn't see enough wins, man. I saw a guy that initially would jump the snap or initially beat a guy with some quickness off the snap and then just not do anything else. He either won immediately and didn't impact the play or just didn't impact the play altogether. I just saw a guy that just was a non-factor on the field. You know, he was a body, you know, and he looks the part of an NFL defensive lineman, but I just didn't see enough wins. I didn't see a guy that impacted the game. And, you know, it's not all about numbers with defensive linemen. You know, it's about your ability to impact the game. No, you didn't make the tackle, but it was your disruption that allowed your backer to come clean and scot-free and tackle that guy for a 1-yard gain and set up 2nd and 9. That's not going to show up on the stat sheet, but we can all see that you had a contribution to that play. I didn't see enough of those. As a matter of fact, I didn't see many of those in the games that I watched with him at Syracuse. So really disappointed in him, and I'm not really all that smitten with this pick. As a matter of fact, this is a guy that I think is just a body, honestly speaking. And he could be more than that because I can see the quickness. I can see some of the anticipation and his ability to get into the backfield and maybe the propensity down the road to be a disruptive force. My comp for him is Ricky Jean-Francois, a guy that I watched in Washington, and maybe he was better in San Francisco. Maybe he was better for the Packers. But I know in Washington, maybe he was better for the Colts. But in Washington, this is a guy that would consistently get in the backfield, touch no one, and the running back would run right up the gap that he vacated. He was a guy that impacted the game little to none. And so this is a guy that I see in Chris Slayton doing a lot of the same. And so I don't love this selection. As a matter of fact, 7th round, 240. Again, he's in the 7th round for a reason. 245th pick overall. A defensive lineman out of Syracuse, Chris Slayton for me is so that's going to do it for the Giants draft. They met all their needs. You know, I had 7 of them listed. They met all of them. Not all of them, to me, met at the level that I would have liked to have seen them met. They went overkill on the cornerback position. I don't necessarily blame them for that. The cupboard was essentially bare. I thought they could have addressed wide receiver a little bit earlier in this draft. I would have liked to have seen that done. Love what they did at edge rusher with Ximenes. I think that they were a little early on Daniel Jones, but I'm not going to beat him up for that. He may turn out to be an exceptional quarterback for them. I thought they could have addressed offensive line a bit sooner and maybe added a little bit more depth than they did earlier in the draft. But okay, I had it as, you know, towards the back of the list of needs in this draft. So I'm not going to kill them for that. I think they did a quality job overall of bringing in talented football players with high IQ and high character. Now we're going to see if they mesh well together and can get this thing turned around in New York sooner rather than later. They've got a young football team now. This draft, to me, has to be the foundation for success moving forward. If this draft is an epic failure, if we look back 4 years from now and 9 of these players aren't on the roster and the 4 that remain are just solid contributors, they're not big-time contributors, then this is an epic fail and Dave Gettleman has to go. So, and again, even if of those 3 or 4, one of them is Daniel Jones and he's a massive success, this is still not good enough. You have to hit big on at least 3 or 4 players in this draft. They have to be big-time players moving forward, staples, guys that are core Giants moving forward. If that's not the case, this draft was a massive failure and someone has to answer to that. We'll see what happens, but let's take a look at the score. This is actually a really solid quality score for this Giants draft and really a quality score for Dave Gettleman. His draft history with me hasn't been great over the years. So that's going to do it for me and this Giants draft here on the Draft Wrap-Up Series. Thank you for joining me. If it's not your man T, it's not the best NFL coverage. It could be. Make sure you subscribe to the Louie Tee Network for more great content. Make sure you turn on that notification bell so you don't miss anything. We're going to break down these divisions. We break down all 32 teams in the National Football League here on the Louie Tee Network. So don't you miss a thing. Turn that notification bell on so you don't miss out on live chat discussions, on live feeds, on videos, all that good stuff and more. Don't miss a thing. Turn that notification bell and make sure you check out the Louie Tee Network podcast as well. A lot of great content on the podcast. Check that out too. I'm your man Louie T, signing off. Until next time, have a good one.
Louie Tee Network.